Part 35. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 341. Time passed day by day, and it was autumn in a blink of an eye. King Rong drafted the names of the 4 examiners and submitted them. After Chu Qing Huang read them, Zhu Baiyu approved them with the word accurate, and the candidates were decided. The candidates who were ready entered the examination room in advance and underwent strict interrogation one after another to resolutely put an end to any form of cheating. When Hongyu learned that he was arranged to enter the Qintian prison, he was full of dissatisfaction and asked to see Her Majesty the Queen. "I am your Majesty's servant. Even if your Majesty does not give me the title of a legitimate king and husband, you should at least grant me one noble lord or shu lord. Why are you sent to Qintian prison?" "Shujun. Your Majesty." Chu Qing Huang glanced at him and wanted to know where he learned the strange title. "Are you sure you want to enter the palace?" Kurha nodded. "If you enter the palace and have a title, you will not be able to leave the palace in this life," Chu Qing Huang said. "Otherwise, it will cause trouble in the palace, and you will be given a white silk ribbon or a foot of red." Hongyu's expression froze. "Bai Ling. This is how palace concubines who make mistakes are dealt with." Chu Qing Huang's voice was calm and calm. "If you have no objection, I am willing to let you enter the palace." Hongyu then began to struggle. "Can't you leave the palace in this life?" "Yes." Chu Qing Huang nodded. "Do you need me to explain to you what 1 foot of red is?" "Unnecessary." Hongyu looked at her silently. "What if His Majesty wants to leave the palace?" "That is my freedom," Chu Qing Huang said. "Do you still want to compare with me?" "No." Hongyu quickly shook his head. "What I mean is that if His Majesty wants to leave the palace, he can take me with him. Doesn't this count as a violation of the palace rules? I will have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards in the future. Generations of new people will replace the old ones. Even if I want to leave the palace, I don't have to take you with me." Chu Qing Huang said lightly. "Maybe it can be done in the first few years. After all, you are pretty now. Ruhua, I can pamper you more. However, when you get older, there will be other beautiful boys entering the palace. I will love the new and dislike the old to pamper others, and I will no longer pay too much attention to you. Then you will only be lonely in the palace. Eventually." Hongyu pouted. "Why is your Majesty so ruthless?" He also wanted to take advantage of the absence of several attendants and the absence of Fukang to win favor, but he did not expect that His Majesty would not give him any chance. A few words ended his thoughts. Hongyu frowned deeply when he thought that a young man like him, a young man with new clothes and an angry horse, would wither in the palace. Forget it. The palace is full of flattery and deceit, and it is difficult to guard against intrigues, which is not suitable for a simple and kind-hearted young man like him. I'd better go to Qintian prison." Hongyu sighed and said with some melancholy. "I calculated on my own, Wen Zhan probably won't win the top prize. How to say? He is destined not to be the number 1 pick. This month is just Qi Wei. Whether you can get the top prize depends on next year's imperial examination." Chu Qing Huang lowered his head and reviewed the papers. "Now that you are here, help me organize these by the way." Hongyu looked at the pile of memorials on the case. "Your Majesty approves so many every day." "Probably," Chu Qing Huang said. "The Supreme Emperor abdicated in a hurry and left a lot of mess for me. Recently, there have been more affairs. Fortunately, no one dares to hold back for the time being, otherwise I am afraid that I will be even more worried." "They don't dare to hold back," Hongyu sneered. "Whoever dares to cause trouble for His Majesty at this time is waiting to have his house confiscated. Although those ministers are not very smart, they are not hopelessly stupid. They know this who should follow the time. Her Majesty has ascended the throne, and it will be useless for them to oppose her. They cannot commit rebellion and directly overthrow Her Majesty the Queen. For the time being, no one has the strength and courage to abolish the emperor and establish a new one. Besides, Both Prince Rong and his son obeyed the emperor's will and loyally assisted Her Majesty the Queen. Who else would dare to have any dissent? When are you going home? Go home, Hong Yu was surprised. Where your majesty is my home. Chu Qing Huang looked at him expressionlessly. Hong Yu smiled coquettishly and replied seriously, I won't go back for the time being. Anyway, my parents are still young, and my mother is in charge of many things in King Yu's fiefdom. My father is too lazy to abdicate and has no plans to abdicate for the time being. I will go back. I can't do anything, so why not stay here and listen to His Majesty's orders? After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 342. The results were announced in September, and the first place winner was Chu Suans, the second son of Prince Rong, and the second place was Wen Zhan. As expected by Hong Yu. Although it is too early to discuss who will be the champion now, after all, the spring examination and palace examination next year will determine the final ranking. But they themselves know who is better between Chu Suans and Wen Zhan. It is said that after the results were announced, Chu Suans hosted a banquet in a restaurant, inviting all the students who passed the exam to drink and exchange their experiences. For all the students, this is obviously a good opportunity to get closer to each other. Passing the exam means that you can become an official. If you can perform well in the spring examination and palace examination next year, it means that your future is limitless. It means that everyone present will be colleagues in the court in the future. They will see each other every day, so it is more important to build a good relationship than anything else. Besides, Chu Suan's status is there, who would not give him face? So on the 6th day of September, everyone was happy to be there. Wen Zhan was also among them. Chu Tianqiu, Chu Tianyan, and Chu Tianzheng, who were able to leave the palace because of the Queen Mother's funeral, were not idle either. They condescended to participate and mingled with the students. So the atmosphere was very subtle. This king has always respected scholars. In the future, the governance of the world and the support of the country will also rely on scholars. It is my honor to drink with you today. Chu Tianqiu raised his glass. I toast you 3 cups. The students looked at each other. The one who invited everyone today was Chu Suans. Although he was born in the Rongwang mansion, because they were both imperial examination students, their identities at this time were the same, and they could be unconventional and speak freely. However, when King Xian got involved, the nature of the matter changed a little. Everyone had to respond respectfully on the surface, but they couldn't help but speculate in their hearts. Is King Xian taking this opportunity to win over the students? What does the exchange banquet for students have to do with him, a county king? Her Majesty the Queen has just ascended the throne. What is his intention in winning over students so openly? How dare we let King Xian toast? Wen Zhan said slowly, with a gentle smile on his face. Second Master Chu has passed the imperial examination, and today you are the host. We should toast to the second master. As he said, he poured himself a glass of wine, stood up and said, Second master is outstanding in knowledge, good in appearance, humble and gentle, and a role model for students of my generation. Today I sincerely toast to the second master. Chu Suans stood up and said, Master Wen's knowledge is not inferior to mine, Suans is just lucky. This year is a lucky year for students. Her Majesty has just ascended the throne, and it is a good strategy to use people. Therefore, the selection of students on the list has been relaxed a lot compared to 3 years ago, and 30 more places can be set up. It is the great grace of Her Majesty. Let's toast to Her Majesty together. This sentence touched the hearts of many students. This year, there are indeed 30 more places. Many students have been studying hard for 10 years just for this opportunity. 30 places are extremely precious to them. If they fail to make the list this year, they will have to wait for another 3 years for the next time. So everyone raised their glasses and faced the direction of the palace, Hail to Her Majesty, long live the Queen. Chu Tianqiu's expression froze, and his face became extremely ugly in an instant. He did not expect that Chu Xuan's and Wen Zhan had such a harmonious relationship. He thought that scholars were all arrogant and most of them would think that others' knowledge and articles were not as good as their own, and they would not accept each other. What's more, Chu Xuan's and Wen Zhan's identities are very different. One is a serious son of the Rongwang mansion, and the other is a servant who serves people with beauty in the eyes of everyone. He has the opportunity to enter the officialdom only because of Chu Qinghuang's favor. It is normal for them to dislike each other. However, he had never expected that Chu Xuan's would be so gentle to Wen Zhan, the illegitimate son of the Wen family. His gentle manner not only made the students like him more, but also prevented Wen Zhan from being discriminated against. This was completely different from what he expected. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 343. Did the king of Xian go to the restaurant where the students were drinking? Yes. Chu Xuanyi accompanied Chu Qinghuang to the tower, his voice calm and steady. Xian Ce and Master Wen get along well. Chu Qinghuang said nothing. Fu Feng had already reported today's events to her. Chu Xuan's was indeed good. Wen Zhan was also convinced and willing to admit defeat to Chu Xuan's. During the conversation, it seemed that they were competing to see who was more humble and approachable, which made some students who were originally watching the show feel a little at a loss. They might have thought that the first and second place should be incompatible, but they didn't expect it to be unexpected. But this result is reasonable. As a bastard of the Wen family, Wen Zhan is much luckier than the bastards of ordinary aristocratic families. He has the support of nobles, but after all, he is not as good as Chu Xuan's. And the second son of the Rong Palace has almost never heard of the outside world since he was a child. He has been devoted to reading sage books. It is not surprising that he has won the first place in one fell swoop. As for the fact that he and Wen Zhan can live in peace, it is even less surprising. Wen Zhan is from her mansion, and the Rongwang mansion is now loyal to her. Let alone Chu Xuan's nature, just because Rongwang and his brother lecture him every day at home, he will never do anything to embarrass Wen Zhan in public. The night sky is full of stars. Chu Qinghuang stood in the wind on the palace building, looking at the lights of thousands of houses outside the palace, with a calm and cold look. Chu Xuan's is good. This year he will pass the exam and next year he will pass the exam. He can enter the court to work. Chu Xuanyi stood beside her, struggling for a long time in his heart. Your Majesty, you put Qi Ling in Mianbei and put Wen Zhan in the court. Aren't you worried that the ministers will be dissatisfied? As everyone knows, Qi Ling and Wen Zhan were both former servants of Her Majesty. Even if Chu Qinghuang did not let them enter the harem after ascending the throne, their origins have left a deep impression in the hearts of the world. Even if they hold high positions in the future, no one will forget that they used to be servants. There's nothing to worry about, Chu Qinghuang said indifferently. People in the world like to care about reputation, and criticize things that are not in line with etiquette with righteous words, but I don't know how many shameful things they have done in private. There is no need to take the words of such people to heart. A true gentleman will never judge people by appearance. On the contrary, those hypocritical villains like to say one thing and say another. Apart from criticizing things they don't like from time to time, what else can they do? But there are many such people in the court, Chu Xuanyi said. The pen of a civil servant can kill people. Your Majesty should think further. If someone makes a fuss about this in the future, it will be bad for Wen Zhan and Qi Ling. Chu Qinghuang raised the corner of his mouth slightly. The more you worry, the more difficult it is to do many things. When a person's reputation is no longer a constraint, he can do things more decisively and invincibly. Chu Xuanyi was silent for a while after hearing this. Many of Chu Qinghuang's ideas are different from those of women today, and even more different from those of men under the current system, so she is considered an alternative. That's why she dared to think of seizing the throne when many princes were still alive and the queen, imperial concubine, and concubine Duan were in a three-way competition, and she really did it. When a person's reputation is no longer a constraint, he can do things more decisively and invincibly. Chu Xuanyi thought about this sentence silently, and soon realized that Chu Qinghuang had never really cared about her reputation, so she acted unrestrainedly and dared to do things that others dared not do. However, how many other people can throw reputation behind them like her? Scholars pay attention to reputation, and women regard reputation as more important than their own lives. How easy is it to put aside etiquette and not be burdened by reputation? Ask Chu Suans to come to the palace tonight. I have something to tell him, Chu Qinghuang said calmly, not caring what Chu Xuanyi was thinking. Also, I have read all the lists you submitted before. I will let them come to the court one after another in the next 2 months. You have to remind them when you have time, so as not to let them do things they shouldn't do. I obey your order. I want to be alone for a while. Chu Xuanyi understood, took a step back, bowed and saluted. I'll take my leave. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 344. Chu Qinghuang looked into the distance in silence, his whole body surrounded by a layer of cold and clear air. It's been so deserted these 2 days. Although she had just ascended the throne, she had already experienced the feeling of not being able to live in a high place. It might be a bit pretentious, but the wolf cub who always made her feel very interesting when she heard her voice was not around, so she was really not used to it. Chu Qinghuang sighed, habits are really a terrible thing. I wonder how Fukang has behaved in the past 2 days. If she didn't want to cure his inferiority complex, she wouldn't have asked him to learn skills. She could sit on her own and govern the world. As long as she promoted a few capable ministers and generals, and the king knew how to appoint people well, it wouldn't be a problem. As for the rest, she will teach her later. So, where did she go wrong? Chu Qinghuang stood alone for a while, the night wind brushed his cheeks, and there was already a bit of autumn coolness in the air. Turn around and walk towards the tower, starting another busy night. At the end of September, a minister asked the queen to replenish the harem. This was a situation that every emperor would face after ascending the throne, and Chu Qinghuang was not surprised. But she only glanced at it and threw it aside. In October, he began to concentrate on court affairs. In mid-October, he held a banquet in Juhua Hall and invited students to the palace to discuss family and state affairs. He put down his pretensions as a king and raised questions, allowing the students to debate freely and express their opinions. If he was wrong, he didn't blame her, as he instantly narrowed the distance between the queen and the student. This kind of close contact allows her to discover talents more quickly. During the debate, she pays attention to the student's talents, courage, mind, structure, and understanding of world events and people's livelihood. She secretly wrote down the names of those who performed more outstandingly, so that they would have a place in the spring and palace examinations next year. After late autumn comes winter, the weather is getting colder and colder, so Yuanbao prepared a charcoal stove for the queen early. Whether he was reviewing memorials in the Kinzen Hall or resting in the palace at night, there was a warm and cozy feeling all over his body. Chu Qinghuang couldn't help but think of Fukang. In the hot summer, he was cold all over. Will he be too cold to sleep in this winter? Tisk. After Chu Qinghuang came to his senses, he couldn't help but frown. She just said it, children's affair can really make a person become unlike himself, making him think and worry all day long. It's completely different from the rational and cold-hearted person before. Maybe she shouldn't have taken special care of Fukang from the beginning. Chu Qinghuang frowned. But what can we do now? It was you who felt pity for him at the beginning, you were the one who couldn't bear his torture, you were the one who felt sorry for him. Listening to his psychological activities every night, you were also the one who secretly found it interesting. The most important thing is that she made a shadow guard who was originally ruthless and desireless develop admiration and various feelings for her. It's too late to regret it now. Never mind. Just keep walking on the path you choose. Her Majesty the Queen sat in front of the imperial palace and struggled alone for a moment. She quickly recovered her thoughts and continued to review the memorial. Your Majesty, Yuan Bao came over to refill the tea and whispered, "It's getting late. Would your Majesty want to rest early?" Chu Qinghuang's tone was calm, "I'll finish reading this before going to bed." Yuan Bao was silent for a moment and then stepped back, "Yes." Chu Qinghuang opened a memorial and suddenly frowned, "Who presented this memorial?" Yuan Bao took a step forward and replied nervously, "These memorials have just been sent by the Ministry of Husbandry and the Ministry of Rights. Invite Minister Wen from the Ministry of Household Affairs to come over." "Yes." Not long after, Wen Xingyun, who was woken up from his warm bed, hurriedly put on his official uniform and entered the palace. He walked into the Kinzen Hall and bowed respectfully, "Your Majesty summoned the minister." "Did the Ministry of Household Affairs send this document to him?" Chu Qinghuang threw the document in front of him with a heavy look, "Increase taxes in Landong? Who came up with this idea?" Wen Xingyun said respectfully, "Your Majesty said in court a few days ago that he wanted to borrow money. The ministers all thought it was inappropriate. Maybe one of the ministers came up with this idea. Why is Landong raising taxes?" Chu Qinghuang's voice was loose but cold, "Who came up with this idea first?" Wen Xingyun replied cautiously, "Landong's harvests this summer and autumn are both good. But the Landong area has never been rich. I remember that there was a flood last summer, and the court couldn't even come up with any money for disaster relief. Fortunately, local merchants came to the aid and were able to overcome the difficulty." Chu Qinghuang frowned, "Last year sow the wheat in the autumn, and the rice will be ready this summer. After the disaster, the local people have just barely been able to breathe, and some bastard is asking for a tax increase." Wen Xingyun's expression changed, Chen. "Shang Shuwen, you haven't answered the question I just asked." Chu Qinghuang asked again, obviously not allowing him to avoid it, "Who came up with this idea?" The signature on the memorial was just a junior official from the Ministry of Revenue. She didn't believe that a junior official would dare to make such a suggestion without anyone's instructions, and submitted it directly to the emperor. Wen Xingyun said tremblingly, I will go back and find out." In fact, this idea was proposed by several officials from the Ministry of Household Affairs. Wen Xingyun was an insider and one of the main messengers. As the Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, he is in charge of the Treasury's money. Of course, what he is most concerned about is the revenue of the Treasury. The Treasury is not sufficient, so what is the point of doing it as the Minister of the Ministry of Revenue? Not even oil or water. Besides, Chu Qinghuang proposed to borrow money from Dongling last time at the morning court, and the ministers were almost unanimously opposed. They were worried that if they couldn't pay back the money in the future, Her Majesty the Queen would want to confiscate the ministers' homes. In this case, it would be better to increase taxes. The income from increasing taxes does not need to be repaid, which is worse than borrowing money. Chu Qinghuang's eyes fell on the top of his head, and his voice was cold and hard. "Tomorrow morning, I want to know who it is." "Yes. Besides, you are the Minister of Revenue, and you shouldn't submit such a memorial." Wen Xingyun was terrified. "Yes. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 345. Rong Yu and Nan 11 obviously did not plan to spend the new year in Dongling, because the journey was not fast. They had to rest for 2 days after walking for 1 day. It took them 2 months to reach Kangyun Mountain. When the winter weather turned cold, Rong Yu simply stopped the journey and stayed in the mountain for a while. He would go to Dongling after the new year when it was warm. So the original plan was abandoned, and Fu Kang followed him to Kangyun Mountain. Then he knew what it meant to have so many masters. It was as if he had returned to the harsh training and fighting with others every day. He was surrounded by well-trained strong men. He dared not sleep deeply or be distracted every night. His nerves were always tense, because if he was not careful, the god of death would come at any time. The only difference was that these masters did not have murderous aura. From the foot of the mountain to the mountainside, and then to the top of the mountain, everyone along the way quietly welcomed the two masters back to the pavilion. The environment on the mountain was also very good. The mountains were endless, and the top of the mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist, like a fairyland. There were dense forests and many wild beasts in the back mountain. The master grew up in such an environment, no wonder he is so skilled in martial arts and beast control. Looking at the mountains in front of him, Fu Kang was silent for a long time, and a strange emotion was slowly aroused in his heart. This is where the master has lived since he was a child. A strong wind blew past his ears, and Fu Kang's mind trembled. He subconsciously raised his hand to fight back. He was about to kill the person with the palm, but when the palm wind was blown out, he suddenly thought of the debt owed in the account book. His body flew out instantly, and the palm of his palm turned to the mountains. Bang! A burst of dust was stirred. Several masters flew out from the valley, stood on the small peaks in front and behind, and looked at Fu Kang expressionlessly. The air was quiet. Fu Kang also looked at them silently. The instinctive reaction of the shadow guard made him secretly estimate in his heart when he saw these people that if he wanted to take action, he could kill these masters in front of him within a few moves. He needed to use the dagger, which was hidden in his boot. These people were very skilled in martial arts, and if they made a mistake, he would have no second chance, so he had to kill them with one move. And he had to kill them in the shortest time after pulling out the dagger, the time before the opponent could react. The silence fermented little by little. However, in the end, Fu Kang neither pulled out the dagger nor fought with them, but nodded calmly, "Sorry, I disturbed your peace." Several masters looked at him calmly, and each of them flashed and left in an instant. Fu Kang did not stay any longer and turned around and left. He lived in Kangyun Mountain for 2 months. Rong Yu taught him the art of war, the art of cunning, and the art of escape from the gates of the strange gate. He had a regular schedule. Except for 3 hours of sleep every day, he was either studying or studying. Rong Yu made a detailed study plan for him, and Fu Kang obeyed it unconditionally, and studied very seriously and attentively. However, even though his learning attitude was impeccable and he had gained a lot in 3 months, Rong Yu was still not satisfied most of the time, so that the debt in the account book kept piling up. By the beginning of the next spring, his apprenticeship time had increased to 5 years and 6 months. Fu Kang stared at the numbers in the account book every night, racking his brains to think about how to shorten the time. The cold 12th month passed, and the weather warmed up at the end of the month. A lightning-fast horse arrived at the foot of the mountain. When the news reached the mountain, Fu Kang was playing chess with Rong Yu. There was a chessboard on a flat stone, and black and white chess pieces were fighting on the chessboard. The moment he heard the news, Fu Kang was excited and wanted to get up and run down the mountain. Rong Yu glanced at him casually, "You look excited." Fu Kang was startled. "You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 346. Focusing back on the chessboard, Fu Kang tried to focus. At least the time on the ledger cannot be increased, otherwise. Fu Kang thought that in 5 years he would be 23 years old, which was still young among men, but if he was with some handsome young men, he would have no advantage at all. Moreover, since the master has ascended the throne, the ministers will definitely spare no effort to ask the queen to fill the harem. It is impossible for the harem to remain empty, in case a handsome man who is more popular with the master is selected into the palace. Rong Yu frowned and looked at Fu Kang, who was twisting the chess pieces with indifferent eyes, wondering what he was thinking. What are you thinking about? Fu Kang's expression changed. He stood up and knelt down. Disciple knows his mistake. Rong Yu stared at him expressionlessly for a moment, and said in a stern tone, kneel down for 2 hours, and record it in the ledger for another 2 months. Fu Kang's expression froze for a moment, but he didn't dare to resist at all. Yes. Rong Yu stood up and left. Fu Kang stared silently at the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard. The white pieces had surrounded the black pieces. Even if he was not dazed, the game would definitely be lost. However, in the past few months, his chess skills have indeed improved a lot, from losing miserably at first, to barely being able to resist a cup of tea, and then slowly realizing that sometimes he can even compete with Rong Yu. It lasted half an hour, although most of the half hour was spent thinking hard. But Rong Yu was tolerant in this regard. He would be given enough time to think about every move he made and had no intention of embarrassing him. He would also mention something when it was time to mention it. Fu Kang's brain is actually not stupid. After mentioning something, he would feel enlightened instantly. So now that he was punished to kneel, he didn't dare to think nonsense anymore and concentrated on thinking about ways to defeat the enemy. Until a cold and familiar voice suddenly sounded, "Want a game?" Fu Kang suddenly raised his head and saw the girl who was coming from Shishi. She seemed to be wrapped in the grace of the sky, and even the mountain scenery was setting off her light. The face of the girl who had been thinking about it day and night was right in front of her, her dark eyes looking at him calmly and leisurely. Fu Kang's expression was visibly joyful, and a warm light appeared in his eyes. He looked at her for a moment and couldn't bear to look away for a long time. "Are you stupid?" Chu Qing Huang sat down where her father had been sitting just now, and quietly looked at the confrontation between the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard, and raised her eyebrows. "It seems that she has made a lot of progress to reach this level." Fu Kang came to his senses and pursed his lips. "Master came by himself." "I brought a few guards," Chu Qing Huang said, reaching out to pick up the white stones one by one and put them in the chess box. The 2 months before the end of the year were extremely busy. There were a lot of things to do every day. After finally taking a breath, I arranged for Prince Rong and several cabinet ministers to temporarily take charge of the government and come to see you. After hearing this, Fu Kang felt moved and distressed at the same time. Master has worked too hard, and my subordinates cannot share the burden with Master Dash. How have you been doing during this time? Fu Kang's voice stopped, and he was so ashamed that he couldn't help but lower his head. "Subordinate. What's wrong?" Chu Qing Huang raised an eyebrow. "You're not behaving well." Fu Kang nodded silently. In fact, he feels that he performs well. He is very focused on learning, rarely distracted, and never lazy. However, the master was so strict that Fu Kang often felt that he was just a piece of rotten wood. Chu Qing Huang was silent for a moment. "Play a game of chess and let me see how much you have improved during this time." Fu Kang nodded, "Yes." He picked up the black stones one by one and put them back into the chess box, gathered his thoughts, suppressed the urge to talk to his master, and focused on the new round of chess. So the 2 hours of kneeling for punishment turned into a game of chess. Although I was still kneeling for punishment, because I met Chu Qing Huang, my mind was calm and I was fully absorbed in the chess game, so that the time passed very quickly. 2 hours of sleep passed. Chu Qing Huang won 5 out of 5 games, but compared to his previous chess skills that were like rotten wood in the princess's mansion, Fu Kang's progress was almost rapid. Leaving aside Rong Yu's strict requirements in the future, this kind of progress is not expected for ordinary people. his skills have indeed improved by leaps and bounds. In the last game, Fukang only lost 3 of her sons. The corners of Chu Qinghuang's lips raised. That's right, my father's teachings are indeed good. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 347. Hearing this, Fukang looked at her in surprise. Not bad. The master is not comforting him. It's really good. There's no need to lie to you. Chu Qinghuang nodded. Learning chess is a boring and long process. It's very rare that you can make such great progress in just 2 months. But Fukang lowered his head and spoke hesitantly. Due to poor performance, the period for learning the art of accounting has been extended from 3 years to 5 years and 6 months. Chu Qinghuang was silent for a moment and nodded casually. It's normal. Normal. Fukang became more and more surprised. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at Chu Qinghuang with tangled eyes. Does the master mean that he is indeed stupid? Otherwise, how could it be normal? Chu Qinghuang was thinking whether to give him some hope. I have been struggling like this all day, and it seems like I have no hope at all. When I first started learning arts, I wasn't very good at many things. It's normal for beginners to make mistakes. It's just that my father is a strict man and has strict requirements for his sons' apprentices. It is difficult for ordinary people to reach the level that satisfies him. Chu Qinghuang smiled faintly. I am punishing you to make you vigilant, to give you a sense of urgency, and to better express your potential. When you have learned everything in the future and have all kinds of skills at your fingertips, then the deadline on the account book is not just what you want. Reduce as much as you want. When Fukang heard this, he suddenly became enlightened. What this sentence means is that he is not very good at all aspects now, so it is normal for him to be punished. When you master everything in the future, you will be fined less and less often, and you will have more opportunities to perform well, and the extended time on your ledger will be slowly eliminated. Thinking of this, Fukang suddenly felt a strong hope in his heart, and he no longer felt hopeless for that unattainable number. Chu Qinghuang said calmly, besides, do you really think your father is willing to keep you by his side for so long? Fukang. That seems right. 2 hours are up. Chu Qinghuang stood up. Get up. Fukang stood up silently, feeling warm in his heart. He guessed that his master knew that he was punished to kneel, so he came to play chess with him to kill time. Although my father's requirements are relatively high, generally those he is willing to advise are talented people, so you don't have to belittle yourself. Chu Qinghuang rubbed his face. How could the person I like be Kukaki? Fukang was so happy that he couldn't help but hold Chu Qinghuang's hand and said in a low voice, Master, won't you be used to it when your subordinate is not around? Chu Qinghuang laughed. You want to ask me if I miss you? Fukang's face was hot, and he lowered his eyebrows and said, I don't dare to be presumptuous. It's true that I'm not used to it, Chu Qinghuang said. He couldn't hear the little shadow guard's inner voice and felt that it was a lot less fun. So you should study and come back as soon as possible. This sentence is sweeter than honey. Fukang's heart was instantly filled with sweetness and warmth. After hesitating for a while, he said, I will miss my master every night. Yes, Chu Qinghuang nodded, her tone not as cold and indifferent as usual, but with a domineering tone that was unique to her. I think it's your duty. If you don't want to, you should hit me. Fukang was slightly stunned, but then his expression softened and he relaxed. He didn't know what was going on. They were not sweet words, let alone coaxing words, but he felt extremely relieved after hearing them. Let's go and see my father and mother, Chu Qinghuang said calmly. By the way, we will confirm the itinerary to Dongling. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 348. Sure enough, she is a female college student. Rong Yu stood with his hands behind his hands, looking at the two people walking leisurely in the distance, frowned, turned around and walked into the house. Don't be melancholy, Nan 11 chuckled, didn't I follow you when I was 16? Qing Huang is the queen after all, and whether she stays or not, she has to get married. As the king of a country, she can only marry but not marry, which is probably the only thing that can make them feel happy. Rong Yu sat down on the chair. You are different from her. What's the difference? Rong Yu looked at her silently. Because I don't have a father who loves his daughter and is afraid that her daughter will be snatched away by wolves. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, and back then, I was not as good as our Nuani are in terms of status, my temperament was not as strong as Nuani are, and my abilities were even less valuable. To mention it, even Nuani R's fingers are not as good as. Don't say that. Rong Yu frowned and interrupted her, your advantages are unmatched by any woman in the world. What advantages? Tamed this strong and excellent husband of mine. Nan 11 chuckled, that's true. Although she had never tamed him, and instead he doted on her unconditionally from beginning to end, such a man who was so outstanding in every aspect that no one could match him was as rare as a feather. Apart from her, no woman had ever had such a man. Lucky. Fu Kang is indeed not as good as him right now. After a while, Chu Qing Huang brought Fu Kang over to say hello. Fu Kang hasn't been disobedient during this time. He is very obedient. I have never seen such a well-behaved child. Nan 11 looked at her daughter with a gentle smile. He is very good in all aspects. He studies hard and diligently. He is well-behaved and obedient. Your father the king is quite satisfied with him. Quite satisfied. Fu Kang stood aside quietly and couldn't help but retort in his heart. The master was not satisfied with him at all. The master's wife must have said this to ease her daughter's heart. How could the person chosen by my daughter be wrong? Chu Qing Huang was full of confidence. Fu Kang is definitely a piece of rotten wood that can be carved. Fu Kang. Nan 11 laughed, it's a piece of rough jade. In my father's heart, he can only be regarded as a piece of rotten wood that can be carved. Chu Qing Huang said with a smile, so I ask my father to carve it carefully. Don't worry about your daughter. Beat him when you need to, and punish him as you should. Rong Yu closed her eyes and drank tea without commenting. I've asked someone to prepare dinner. You go and rest for a while. I'll have someone deliver the meal to you later. Nan 11 said, we will set off for Dongling in 3 days. Chu Qing Huang thought for a while, Fu Kang and I will leave first and rush to Dongling as early as possible. After meeting the emperor's brother, we will stay for a few days before we have to return to Ziki. In Chunwei, she had arranged for Prince Rong to take full responsibility, and the name of the examiner had also been decided. All aspects of the preparations were thorough, and students with real talent and learning should be able to get a ranking that meets their level. But this year is after all the first year of her ascension to the throne, and the rectification of the imperial court has just begun. She has to rush back to personally conduct the palace examination and select the talents she is satisfied with. Therefore, if she can arrive in Tangling before March, she will stay for a month at most before returning. No problem, you are the king of Ziki now, you can make your own decisions in everything. Nan 11 said, we won't interfere too much, but if you need help, you can always ask. Chu Qing Huang hummed, thank you, mother. After speaking, she took Fu Kang and left. Returning to his original residence, Chu Qing Huang looked at it for a while, then turned to look at Fu Kang, do you want to sleep with me tonight? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 349. Sleep together at night? Fu Kang was so excited that he nodded as if he was floating. Yes. Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows. I haven't seen you for a few months. You have changed a lot. Nodding without hesitation? Fu Kang hesitated for a moment after hearing this. Am I too unrestrained? Chu Qing Huang nodded, a little bit. Fu Kang was silent. But if he was reserved, would the master think he was unwilling? Besides, he saw that his master was not too reserved in front of his master's wife. He always said what he wanted to say and never beat around the bush. He felt that this way of getting along was very comfortable, without having to guess, although he usually couldn't guess the master's mind. Chu Qing Huang raised the corners of her mouth, thinking that the little shadow guard's heart was indeed more interesting. Just listening to his thoughts could make her happy. After washing up in the evening, Fu Kang squatted in front of the desk and copied. Seeing this, Chu Qing Huang did not disturb him. She sat on the couch alone and looked through his account book. Her expression unconsciously relaxed, and she did not look cold and distant as before. Looking up at Fu Kang, who was squatting in front of the desk, Chu Qing Huang thought of the memorials from the ministers in recent days asking her to fill the harem. She could not help but complain in her heart. In the past, everyone criticized and impeached her for being unorthodox and uneducated, but now they wished that she would select people to enter the palace every day. However, looking at the whole Ziki, can you find someone as interesting as Fu Kang? Even if they are young men from aristocratic families with outstanding temperaments, I am afraid that few of them can withstand her unintentional listening. Who can have such rich and interesting inner thoughts like Fu Kang? She even felt that she had the skill specifically for Fu Kang. Otherwise, with her status, even if she had a little pity for him at first, she would not pay too much attention to him. At most, she would improve his eating habits, and not torture him violently like Chu Qing Huang before. As for the rest, it was probably like a normal relationship between a master and a shadow guard. He would order him to do something, and hide in a corner when he had nothing to do, like an invisible man. Master Fu Kang turned his head and looked at Chu Qing Huang with complicated eyes. I can't concentrate. Chu Qing Huang raised his eyebrows. Why? Fu Kang was very honest. Master, if you keep staring at me, I will be distracted. Chu Qing Huang was silent for a moment. Do you mean to let me go out? Fu Kang shook his head hurriedly. Then I won't look at you. Chu Qing Huang lowered her eyes and put her eyes back on the account book, but soon she didn't know what she thought of, and said lightly, don't call yourself a subordinate anymore, and don't call me master anymore. Fu Kang frowned. Then I should dash. Call me senior sister for me to hear. Fu Kang was confused. Senior sister. Chu Qing Huang nodded. Yes, call me like that in the future. Fu Kang frowned slightly. Senior sister? It seems a bit awkward. He felt that it was more comfortable to call him master, maybe because he was used to it. Keep writing, Chu Qing Huang said calmly. Finish it early and rest early. Fu Kang replied yes, and returned his attention to the main task, copying every stroke very carefully. Time passed little by little, and when Fu Kang finished copying today's homework, it was already Haishi. Chu Qing Huang asked him to show her what he copied, and Fu Kang did it. Over the past few months, your handwriting seems to have improved. Chu Qing Huang nodded slowly, praising generously. You have improved in all aspects. It seems that the master I found for you is really good. Fu Kang said with embarrassment, I am stupid. Chu Qing Huang handed the copy back to him, got up to wash, and was busy for a while. When he lay on the bed, it was almost midnight. Fu Kang knelt beside him, looking at Chu Qing Huang with burning eyes. Can I kiss the master? Chu Qing Huang narrowed his eyes. What did you say? Fu Kang was startled. quickly grabbed a quilt and covered himself with it, and said in a muffled voice, "I didn't say anything, the master heard it wrong." After the divorce, the princess was forced to raise a sickly villain. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 350. Chu Qing Huang saw that he was wrapped in the quilt, and couldn't help but smile with pursed lips, stretched out his hand and pulled his quilt. "Aren't you afraid of being suffocated?" Fu Kang stretched out his two hands, quietly pulled the quilt down a little, and revealed a timid face. "I deserve to die." Chu Qing Huang handed him his hand. "You are allowed to kiss my jade hand." Fu Kang grabbed her hand and looked at it carefully. "The master's hand is really beautiful." "Yeah, I think it's beautiful too." Fu Kang's eyebrows were dyed with a smile, and he turned around and looked at Chu Qing Huang shyly. "The master is beautiful everywhere." "Yeah, it's true." Fu Kang touched her hand and was reluctant to let go. "The master is not only beautiful, but also gentle and noble, like the Queen Mother of the Nine Heavens. In short, in one sentence, the master is like a goddess in his heart, perfect and impeccable. No matter from which aspect, it is the best, and there is no flaw." Chu Qing Huang was so happy that she rubbed his face fiercely. "You are right." Although Fu Kang has never been good at sweet talk, even the most straightforward words to coax people are not charming at all, nor are they as refined and reserved as those scholars, but the more so, the more it can touch people's hearts. Because the truth is not adulterated. What he said is what he thought in his heart, without embellishment or exaggeration, so real that it makes people feel cute. Chu Qing Huang sighed. "I am such a noble and beautiful Nine Heavens mysterious lady, but I was captured by you, a little shadow guard. Do you think you should be beaten?" "You should be beaten." Fu Kang nodded. "As long as I can stay by the master's side, I am willing to be beaten every day." Chu Qing Huang felt that the past few months of separation probably made Fu Kang accumulate too much emotion, and after meeting, he couldn't help but release all of it. At this time, he said one nice thing after another, wishing to praise her to the sky. It is said that a short separation is better than a new marriage. This sentence really makes sense. After only a few months of separation, the previously taciturn shadow guard has learned to speak sweet words. If they meet again after 3 years of separation, will he pounce on her directly? No. Chu Qing Huang shook her head secretly. It would be cuter if the little shadow guard was well behaved. She was already domineering enough. If there was another domineering wolf cub, would the two of them fight at the head of the bed and the foot of the bed? So Chu Qing Huang decided temporarily that she couldn't spoil him too much, otherwise the little loyal dog would definitely become more and more demanding and evolve towards the goal of the wolf cub little by little. "Go to sleep." Chu Qing Huang lay down on the bed and pulled the quilt over her body. "Don't think about it anymore, don't touch me, and don't do bad things while I'm asleep." Fu Kang pursed his lips and looked at her silently. He didn't do anything bad, but it was okay for him to look at her. The master couldn't stop him from looking at her. After not seeing her for so long, the master didn't know how much he missed her. Chu Qing Huang coughed lightly, pretending that she didn't hear his voice, and closed her eyes to sleep. Fu Kang put one hand around Chu Qing Huang's waist and the other hand on her forehead, staring at her master's sleeping face. The more he looked, the more reluctant he was to look away. His eyes were full of joy and satisfaction. "The master is so beautiful." Chu Qing Huang silently endured someone's too hot gaze, and said lightly, "You stare at me like this, I can't concentrate on sleeping." "This sounds so familiar." Fu Kang pursed his lips, a little embarrassed. "Master, do you want me to go out?" "Hey! Learn quickly." Chu Qing Huang opened his eyes and looked at him with interest. "If I really ask you to go out, will you do it?" Fu Kang shook his head repeatedly. "So you will choose to disobey?" Fu Kang froze, and subconsciously shook his head again. "I dare not disobey." Chu Qing Huang said, "So if I really let you go out, will you go out or not?" Fu Kang was silent for a moment, then pulled her hand to his lips and kissed it, his voice soft, as if begging for mercy. "We haven't seen each other for so long, the master must not have the heart to let me go out."